ready, I will go ahead and call to order the, get my mouse here so I can see what I'm doing. Thursday, February 13th, 2020 meeting of the Royal Oak Zoning Board of Appeals. The board does not write the zoning ordinance, but does have the authority to grant relief from it where practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship would result. The board will vote on each agenda item following a public hearing. Use variance requests require a minimum of 6 affirmative votes in order to grant the requested variances. Non-use variance requests require a minimum of 5 affirmative votes in order to grant the variances. If you would like to request that the board table or adjourn your case due to the absence of a full board, and we are down 1 member this evening, please notify the chairperson immediately after the public hearing. Petitioners shall do their best to limit their presentations to 10 minutes. Each participant in the public hearing shall do their best to limit their comments to 3 minutes, which takes us to our first item, the minutes for the November 14th meeting.
Motion to approve.
Oh, we have a comment on them first.
Okay.
So I want to note that the minutes from the November 14th meeting have been modified on recommendation from the city's legal counsel for the request at 5060 Coolidge for the proposed billboard. We do have a representative from our city attorney's office here tonight, and I can let Ryan explain the nature of the changes.
Yes, sir.
Well, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. If there are no questions and the board is satisfied, the board can vote to approve the minutes if it would like.
You want the motion to indicate the minutes as modified?
As modified, yes.
Okay. Mr. Kroll?
I'll make that motion to approve as modified.
Second.
Any discussion? Additions, corrections, deletions? Not seeing any, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, that takes care of that. We don't have any old or unfinished business, so that moves us right along to item D1, our first item of new business, which is case number 200201, public hearing on the appeal of Carson Equities LLC petitioner and Kinsey-Garrett Funeral Home, Inc., owner for the following variances: waive 92 of the minimum required 149th Street off-street parking spaces, waive 2 feet of the minimum required 20 feet for 10 parking spaces to permit construction of a 7-story, 96-foot tall business school, Baker College, on the site of a former funeral home, Kinsey-Garrett, located at 420 South Lafayette. Mr. Hart.
Okay, so this request is related to the redevelopment of the Kinsey-Garrett Funeral Home site into a campus for Baker College's business school. The subject property is located at the intersection of West 5th and South Lafayette Avenue. It is located in the city's central business district. The applicant proposes a 7-story or 96-foot structure with 1 level of underground parking. The variance requests before you today pertain to the parking, both the number as well as dimensions. So let me go to plan here. Okay. So per zoning standards, business or technical schools inside or outside of the central business zoning district must provide 1 parking space per classroom plus 1 space per 150 square feet of usable floor area. The proposed building has 17 classrooms proposed and contains 19,769 square feet of usable floor area. And this calculates to a parking requirement of 149 off-street parking spaces. The building contains a total of 67 spaces. Those are located on 3 levels. There are 31 on the basement level, 11 on the ground floor, and 25 on the second floor. So subtracting 67 from 149, you get 82 spaces deficient in this plan. Additionally, 10 of the parking spaces do not meet zoning standards for length. 20 feet in length is required at the angle proposed, 90 degrees, and for 10 of the spaces, 18 feet is proposed. So the petitioner is seeking a variance to waive 2 feet of the minimum required length of 20 feet for those 10 spaces. So on the plans here, we've highlighted in red which of those spaces are deficient in length. So I believe it's 5 on the basement level, 3 on the second level, and 2 on the ground floor. So the way that the variance request was structured was to allow for, should the board approve the requested dimensional variances for the 10 parking spaces, then the petitioner requires a variance to waive 82 of the minimum required 149 parking spaces. But should the board not approve the dimensional variances, then the request would be to waive 92 of the minimum required 149. So that's why the public notice advertised the 92 waiver, just to allow for, you know, the possibility that one could be approved and one not, and not have to send them back to planning commission or back to us to revise the request. I would like to note that the applicant has conducted a parking study and supplied a memo stating their case for providing less parking. That has been included in your materials, and I'll let the applicant speak more on those documents. And lastly, I would just note that the development received site plan approval from the planning commission at their meeting on Tuesday, contingent upon the approval of the variance request before you today. Yeah.
Any questions for staff? Mr. Kroll?
Yeah, I was just curious, so if this were an office building, 7-story, similar type building, they would not have to have any parking?
There are several uses in the central business district.
But an office building, specifically, if it was an office building, which it could be.
Joseph, no, we would not.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
The fact that there's a parking garage right across the street does not impact their necessity to have all those spaces at all?
It does not impact the variance request before you.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, not seeing any. Are the petitioners present?
Good evening. My name is Robert Carson. I represent the applicant. I'm an attorney with offices in Bloomfield Hills. We thank you for our opportunity to present our petition. And the site plan did receive unanimous support 2 nights ago. And we're pleased about that, and this is the time for us to get the variances, or seek, I guess, the variances that have been requested. There was an interesting question that you asked, because the way the ordinance reads, it reads that it has to be on-site or within 300 feet for off-site parking. The parking structure is technically off-site, but the policy, I believe, of Royal Oak has been to not count that, because although there are spaces available, and we'll demonstrate that, and it has been demonstrated through the parking study, because we do not own those spaces or do not have a long-term lease for those spaces, although we are in negotiations with the management of the parking structures to lease space. But that was the question you asked. Yes, it is it's not only within 300 feet, it's within 50 feet. And we will demonstrate what the parking studies have demonstrated is both in that lot, and I think I'll take out 2 boards, just if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
To demonstrate this, and we can actually leave them to the side. I'll cut in front, then I'll go back. Okay. So this is how the property sits. In Lafayette. And then, as you can see, it is directly across the street from the South Lafayette lot. It's within 300 feet of one other parking structure, and within 500 feet of another one. A couple things I'd like to point out with respect to the plan, to give some context to this, and then we'll try to move through it fairly quickly, is that one of the things to realize is that the building as planned has no food service or ancillary services aside from classrooms, administrative offices, and offices for faculty, and parking within the building. What that means to the city of Royal Oak and its environs and the other people in the central business district is you're gonna have a level of vitality and use of the other ancillary services, including restaurants and other retail establishments within the city, by all of the students and faculty who come here. They cannot eat within the building. So we see it as a catalyst for the kind of vitality that Royal Oak has designed itself for and is looking for, both in its new Class A office buildings, which have been constructed on top of what used to be, as everybody knows, municipal lots. I was involved with one right across the street for, on the same side as the city, and having that go forward. So I'm real familiar with respect to that and in the program of the city going vertical with respect to parking, which I think at the time of the adoption of this ordinance, as it affects this school, did not have the kind of parking lots that it has today. So this type of use, and I'm not going to spend much time on it because I know this isn't site plan, but this type of use has a number of accretive benefits to the city, both in the vitality, the kind of estimated economic pop to the city, so to speak, almost $500,000 we estimate in spending within the general area. The concept of having students available for this type of, and this is a very affordable college. And I know that the number of people who graduate from the Royal Oak Public School Districts, many of them have trouble, and it's a common thing today with respect to the amount of debt that students incur. This is a very affordable institution to come within the city for the residents of the city and the kids who are graduating. This college has a 2-year degree, 4-year degree, master's, and a doctorate in limited studies. So it can also benefit from a 2-year institution, which is also within the community, can naturally transfer over and work together. It also has a very active intern program, which is part of the school, to work within the businesses in the community. So we see this as really a great opportunity. Now, as was pointed out to you, there are 2 types of variances that are being requested. We have maximized the parking on site. We've not only maximized it, we've maximized it to a incredibly expensive extent. And one of the criteria is practical difficulty or unique conditions which create hardship on the property. This property, and we have a study which I can provide and I'll pass out if it's necessary, has a very high water table. Water is encountered between 6 and 15 feet. And to go down even one level, we'll have a whole process of dewatering and adding extra expense to it. So we've tried to put all the possible parking we can to get 67 spaces on the property. We've devoted essentially 3 levels to parking. Below ground, as was pointed out, on the first floor parking, and on the second floor parking on this site to get the 67 spaces. Now you have before you, and it was submitted, and I can pass out a synopsis of it, a parking study which comments on what the national standards are for both the length of spaces and using the Urban Land Institute criteria and the Parking Association criteria. 18 feet for spaces in length is the national criteria. This is 20. We're here to get a variance of those 2 feet for the 10 spaces so that we can get those 10 spaces onto the site without endangering anyone. I think we all drive into parking lots. We all drive into structures, and you'll see a very common thing which says compact only in order to get appropriate parking and maximize safely the parking opportunities within the structures. That's something comparable to this, except it will take full-size cars. As everybody knows, cars are different than what they used to be. There's no more of these boats for cars. And the national standard is 18 feet. It is a hardship in the sense that we could not get those 10 spaces. If those 10 spaces go away, and we think it would be a waste for them to go away, we want to park as much as we can on the site. It would then increase to 92, as was mentioned. The criteria of the number of spaces off-street that can't fit on-site. Now, how do we get to 149 spaces, and how is that criteria established? I don't mean to be pedantic if everybody understands it, but it's a formula that's set forth in the ordinance. And the ordinance has, as was mentioned, 1 space for every classroom plus 1 space for every 150 square feet of classroom spaces. You do that formula, and you come out with 149 spaces. We have analyzed and have provided you in the parking study what the national criteria would be for this type of use. That's 1 whole level. It is substantially less. In fact, we'll fully park the national criteria. The other criteria that we've established is analysis by, and by the way, this was done by a highly regarded parking study, a company, Fleiss and Vanderbrink. In fact, we have a representative here of that company. And analyzing peak loads and the peak uses and average uses, we will be a fraction of what the formula provides. And all of that is in the parking study, which I'm happy to run through, and I'll give you a synopsis of it. In addition to that, by taking the data that's available from the City of Royal Oak's parking business function, and by the way, it is a goal of the city to pay for these decks through the parking revenue, and therefore they want the decks to be used. That's why, had there been any other use in the central business district, for instance, an office building with more people using that office building, especially today as we develop office buildings, no longer are most of the floors on the office buildings done with separate cubbyhole offices with doors, everybody in private spaces. They're done in what is called office landscape with a significantly higher census within the building, and therefore a significantly higher demand. If this does not go, God forbid, if it doesn't go as a institution as proposed, which requires on-site or off-street parking, then there'll be no parking that's required. And therefore, as to the justice to the and benefit to the neighbors, it, 1, upholds the central business district criteria, and 2, diminishes the parking load that might otherwise be created by a use that's appropriate and zoned, just like this is an as-zoned piece, but this as-zoned use requires us to try to have off-street parking. Now, I think if this is this the map? If this is the chart?
Correct.
So what you have here in this chart, which I can't see and you can see, is a synopsis of use and availability. I think it's in your charts too. In the parking study, you have this chart. Is a synopsis of the use at various times, including the parking load that would be the off-street parking that is not on site for this use. And it shows the openings in the decks. At no time do we come close to maximizing the deck on the average load, even at peak times, including the deck across the street. We'll still have available spaces if everybody were to park in that particular deck. These people will be parking all over because they'll want to go to lunch at someplace or dinner someplace else. This institution has day and evening classes, Monday through Thursday. This is the current schedule. Friday, only during the day, and currently nothing on the weekend. So Royal Oak, I can testify to this, by the way, as I tried to get a parking space as I came here tonight. So apparently, there's no, the big interest in parking has been to develop Class A office buildings and this type of use to bring people in during the day to have a more vibrant use. Also, the average age of people here who go to this institution, obviously there's a big age disparity, but the average is 26, being an ideal educated person to live in Royal Oak either now or eventually. And as these people matriculate, more and more people are also coming through the use of Uber, bicycles, we have bicycle spaces, and moped spaces, et cetera. And people could walk if they live in the community, so that the parking load, we do not anticipate to be what the formula would be. Might as well get out of the way a couple of the pass-outs, just to give you the synopsis, if I can find them easily. And if I may approach to hand these out.
Yeah, hand them to Mr. Olfak and he'll hand them around to us.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Actually, go Nancy's direction. I'm sick, so let me be
All
the
right,
last
good
one.
in this
idea.
case, all right?
Where do you want me- Just tell me where you want me to go. Yeah, politely.
If he's got a cold start over there.
Touch it when he gets done with it.
Okay, so here are these are synopsis. And I don't think that you've seen the geotechnical report, which shows the high water table. And what this, the format of what I'm gonna pass out has the first page and the second page, just to show you to whom it was addressed and who did it. And then it has the fourth page, and in the center of the fourth page has the discussion of the groundwater. So that it's an easy way for you to have it, and it goes to the evidence which you will hopefully in your resolution cite too. So, I give it to you? Yeah. So I think there's 8. One other thing before I get, the next phase will be after I make this last point, is to go through the criteria with you. And the last point I want to make is, what are the characteristics of a great city? And I think one of the characteristics of a great city, and we can have a number of examples, is higher educational facilities and institutions, and health-related hospitals and medical. And that does a couple things. One, it brings in people who are creative, people who want to sink roots, people who, through their educational bases, have a greater earning power. Even an associate's degree or a higher educational degree adds between $25,000 and $50,000 annually on average to somebody's potential earning capacity. Another thing that those institutions do, and if you look to, and I know we're not the size of Boston, but maybe Ann Arbor, Chicago, Austin, Texas, et cetera, is that in times of economic downturn, through economic cycles, the educational facilities and the health facilities continue to function at a high level. And that tends to smooth out the dips for various cities. That's another benefit aside from the people running around and being active that benefits a city. Now, what brings us to the ZBA and asks us to ask for your positive response? This situation of the high water table makes it that we cannot go down. It is difficult and it's hugely expensive to dewater the site to go down for one level. I think as everybody knows, parking structures or below-ground parking is usually, in the best of circumstances, a real expensive and very difficult engineering feat to accomplish. Most buildings don't do that for that reason. We're doing it to try to maximize to the unique characteristics of the site what can be done on site. And therefore, that unique characteristic creates the hardship, which says we can't put any more. And in fact, we've taken away from the first floor and the second floor in order to park more on the site. Given that, in connection with what is otherwise we believe to be an excess by formula of what will be required, it is not in the interest of anyone, not in the interest of the city, not in the interest of green space, not in the interest of us, to overpark or create more parking spaces than is going to be used under any conceivable circumstance. So we believe that the justice of the circumstances and the fairness of a development such as this mandates that we receive. And that's why we respectfully ask for the variances that we've asked for. We do not want to lose and see no reason to lose 10 spaces by the 2-foot length disparity. We'll do where we can, the 20 feet, although we don't think that those would be necessary either. We're not asking for that. But where the configuration of the ramps and the size of the drive areas, the aisles, require it to be shorter by the 2 feet, meets the standard, the national standards, we ask that you grant this variance in order for us to be able to provide those 10 spaces internally. I've given you the studies. I've talked about the lot across the street. If anything, if that was the only lot that was available, it could park all of the needs of this institution and still have, as you can see, I hope, you can, I can't, as you can see by this chart, the availability of both this institution, everybody else, and still have extra spaces. And beyond that, there are all these other structures that are available within a short distance for these students and faculty to use. The one other thing, which I am not an expert on, and if you want more information, I'll be able to call somebody up. They are going to use an active parking application on smartphones. And that application will tell them how many spaces are available within the building and how many spaces are available within the lots, within the structures. So you won't have a situation where these people who come in and don't know where to go, or can't find a parking space, or have any problems within the city in finding a parking space. Which is a unique thing, and if you want more information as to that, I'd be happy to have somebody who can better talk apps than I can come up. If
You'd have to be able to find your phone in order to use that, all right?
somebody's phone, somebody's phone, is somebody's smartphone, I guess. So let's see if I can run through a summary of the criteria that we're going to ask you to find in approving these variances in order to get this site plan going, the building up and running, as was unanimously approved 2 nights ago. The first thing is, do these restrictions unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted purpose? This is an as-zoned permitted purpose, which, if the strict compliance with the formulaic analysis, would prevent this project from going forward. Without this variance, as currently enacted, the ordinance, this project is over. And you can look forward to an office building, which will create more of a burden on the city, I would assume. So that's the first point. The second point, if you grant the variances, would that do substantial justice to the applicant as well as other property owners in the district? Well, yes. It will do substantial justice because it will allow the development to go forward. It will carry out the use that's been approved by the city. It will not burden any part of the city or its residents because there's, one, there will be less of a use than the formulaic analysis. And 2, there is more than enough parking in the deck, both across the street and within 300 feet, and another one within 500 feet. Ergo my chart, which you see it, I don't. And moreover, will it do substantial justice to the other people? Yes, it will carry out the purpose of the central business district, which is to have no parking for most uses and establish the use that's been already adopted by the ordinances and the policy of the city. And the other criteria within that one is a lesser relaxation appropriate? And the answer is no, because this is the formula. We don't think we need all those spaces. We're not attacking the formula, but you can't do anything. We can't ask you to do anything other than approve what the formula describes as necessary, although we don't think we're going to have that number of parking ever. So that's why that criteria is met. And the next issue to be addressed under the ordinance and under the State Enabling Act is this due to unique circumstances of the property? And the answer is, I believe, yes. You have the hydrologic study. We cannot go down anymore. We can't go up anymore and still have, I think, devoting 3 floors is a lot to ask for from a development of this size, and to get the yield for an institution that is an approved use. And unusual for the central business district, one of the few uses, I think, churches and maybe hospitals, something like that, are the 3 or 4 items that require parking in the CBD. And therefore, we didn't create this either, the last item, which is, this has not been created by any person presently having an interest. I read with interest the study that you have, which says that you can blame it on the glaciers. As it analyzes the soil configurations from whatever they are, down to sand, down to clay, down to something else, it is from the glacier ages coming and going, and that's what deposited the soils. That's why you have a high water table in Royal. Wasn't our fault. We had nothing to do with the glaciers, although
You're not
by
taking
tomorrow
credit for
morning, somebody's gonna be responsible at 3 degrees. So therefore, we believe that we meet all of the criteria. We believe that we meet the intent of not only the ordinances, but of the city, to really bring this city forward. We're trying to do that with what we hope to be a great use, and we hope that we're able to get the variances tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to come back after the public hearing to address any items that come up. I believe that you've gotten positive letters from people in the community in support of this, and I hope that everybody else in the community, once they take a look at it, will see this to be a really a tremendous opportunity by both the user, the use, and the reduced parking that would otherwise come by a different user who doesn't have to provide parking. And if you don't have any questions, I'll be happy to sit down.
Any questions for the petitioner? Yes, ma'am, and then Mr. Olfak.
My question is this gonna be, is your building gonna be private parking, or will you open it to when you're not in use, which it looks like you're not using it on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, correct?
Well, I don't know whether faculty will be there during those times. The current schedule has nothing on Friday night. Does have classes during the day on Friday. I can't tell you whether they will open it for public use from a security standpoint. I don't know how the building's gonna lay out. I don't know how it's gonna be locked, et cetera. So, I can't tell you.
Mr. Olfak.
Approximately how many people are in per classroom, and what's the maximum number of classes going at any given time?
I'll try to answer your question. My name is Steve Carson. I'm the applicant. The classroom, or the building occupation, is between 70 and 150 people throughout the day. I don't know the number of classes. That'll be based upon the curriculum and how they set up the schedule. But it'll go between 70 and 150 throughout the day. There are a number of, as was mentioned earlier, in addition to on-site classes, a number of the students take internships, so they'll have off-site commitments. There are also distance commitments that are with certain classes as well. So while there may be 70 or 100 people devoted to that building at one time, some of those may not be used at the same time. I hope that answers your question. I just can't answer the number
No,
of
because
classes.
it's confusing, because you've got a classroom count of 17.
Right.
So if you've got 70 to 100, obviously you're not using all 17 classrooms at a time. Even if you're doing, say, 15 to 20 people per that adds up to a lot of classrooms that are just empty, it seems like the majority of the time.
Yeah, so
But has the potentiality of being grossly under parking count would be grossly off if all those classrooms were filled at the same time.
Yeah, no, the classrooms are set up. There's 19,000 plus square feet of classroom space, 17 classrooms. They're set up to handle the number of people that are going to be there at any one particular time. So it's not like an office building. I don't know if anyone has been recently to universities or other colleges. When you walk through the hallways, and sometimes these classes are empty, and you think, "Oh my God, this is wasted space. Why aren't all these classes full all the time?" That's the educational system, and that's how they're run. Sometimes they're full, sometimes they're not. There's laboratory space, there's collaborative space. It's meant to create a collaborative environment. So while an office building may have 100,000 square feet and it could have 500 people working in there at any particular one time, university space, much like you probably walked into MSU classes and you're like, where is everybody? Well, they're meant to be collaborative. They're either off campus, they're off site, maybe they come back on site. There's laboratory space, which is utilized by the same classroom spaces, so they'll flip-flop from classroom to laboratory. So the building was designed to accommodate between 70 and 150 people during the day. 120 to 150 between 12, maybe and 5 p.m., 70 people in the mornings. That's how it was set up. But I understand your question, I understand your point. I think it goes more toward the nature of the use of a university and an educational system where they're meant to be more collaborative, they're meant to be more open, people can walk around, they can get into groups. They're not meant to be tight like an office environment. So that's how it was designed. It was designed specifically for that number.
Okay. So if it was designed for our 70 to 150, that means you're 70, you're already 3 spots under because you have 67. Why didn't you go up 1 more story of parking?
Well, it wouldn't fit the use. I mean, we're unable to accommodate all the parking there. We wouldn't
No,
be able to accommodate the use.
I know that, but I'm saying, why didn't you have, the 3rd floor is another story of parking versus another floor of classrooms?
Well, in order to make the institution viable, it needed the kind of space that we're talking about. But that's not the only reason. If you go back into the parking study, not everybody who goes to that institution is gonna drive a car. And they just don't. And as time passes, fewer and fewer people will come as one person per car. They're gonna ride a bike, they're gonna have a moped, they're gonna come by Uber or Lyft, and that's really what the situation is. They're also gonna come with other people, which is very common when people go to an institution. They ride together. So a friend they come together. So you're gonna have at least a 20% below the number of what we anticipated has been called for. So you're talking about 120 or 75 to 120 people or whatever it is that turns out during the day. You're talking about 149 dedicated spots. Based on the ordinance, and we think that the average is gonna be significantly less. It's all in the parking study.
The average is about 87 parking spaces on a daily demand. So if we were to park it to 149, it would be an absurd amount of parking spaces.
And I understand that. That's why I said, why not 1 more floor since you got about 25 parking spots?
It's a good question. We analyzed it. It wouldn't make the project viable.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So I take it you did a study to see about the viability of this school if you created a building that would fit within that space and have the parking that is required by the ordinance?
The school has done a study that they needed a certain number of square footage of usable space. So in order to give them the amount of usable space, it required, which I think comes out to about 69,000 square feet of usable space.
Sir, can I ask you to stand by
I'm
for a
sorry,
moment, please?
goes in the video.
Yeah, thank you.
So the viability of the project requires about 69, 70,000 square feet of usable space, excluding parking areas and mechanical systems and so forth. So that's what we've provided. And we went up to the maximum height allowable under the CBD. And again, I think that's why we did that.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Just on average, how many students per class? You have Baker College, I mean, as a general.
Well, I'll ask that question. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
The average class size is 12. Average class size is 12, average age 26. The average annual cost is $9,000. The largest independent university in the state of Michigan. It's the least expensive independent university in the state of Michigan. It continues to grow. It's really excited to be here in Royal Oak, and done everything they can to maximize their space, to utilize it, as well as meet their demand and then the available surplus of their parking.
I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to ask you gentlemen to take a seat so I can go ahead and open up the public hearing. Absolutely, I'm sure that'll probably be happening. Just by quick show of hands, who intends on speaking on this tonight, just so I can sort of get a feel? All right, so allow me to do this. Wait for me to recognize you. You have 3 minutes to address us, and who wants to go first? The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Alan Simonian. I am here as the Executive Director of Stagecrafters Community Theater, located directly across the street. I'd like to address a couple points. First of all, the actual ordinance itself, section 770-124, which says whereby unique, extraordinary, or exceptional conditions of such property, the strict application of the regulation enacted would result in peculiar or exceptional practical difficulties to or exceptional undue hardship upon the owner of such property. There are no unique, extraordinary, or exceptional conditions in this case. The property could be developed for other uses, like office or retail, that don't require the provision of the parking variance. In addition, the plight of the landowner is due to the unique is not due to the unique circumstances of the property. So, from that standpoint, many other opportunities could be used for that space that would not require a variance, and it would not be an undue hardship of that property. Number two, I want to talk about the parking problem we currently have. The number one complaint we get from patrons at Stagecrafters Theater that we have no control over is access to parking. In addition, with all due respect with parking studies, you don't have to do much to ask people about the parking situation in that area when there's something going on at the Royal Music Theater and Stagecrafters and the other local businesses, such as the Royal Oak Methodist Church and St. Mary's. I further would suggest that, for example, last night when PBS was there, live show with This Old House at Stagecrafters, people were coming from all over the state, enjoying our city and dining and shopping in Royal Oak while they're at the theater. Next, I want to talk about the contributions to the community. First of all, Baker College as a nonprofit would not be paying property taxes, so they would not be subsidizing any of the parking that's already there. And as students, with all due respect, they're not going to be spending money in the city of Royal Oak the way that patrons at local theater events are going to be spending money. And they're coming to town to go to school, and they're leaving. I thought it was interesting because I Googled Baker College, and I said, is Baker College a good college? And Baker College's educational quality places it in the bottom tier of our nationwide overall best colleges ranking. However, when compared to other colleges and universities that deliver the same caliber of education, the net price to attend Baker College is higher than it should be. My question to you is Royal Oak wanting quantity or quality? There's a reason why Ferndale rejected this. I would suggest to you that Baker College is not the quality that we would want in this town. I also would like to address the fact that this business plan of a 7-story building for 17 classrooms with an average class size of 12 and only having classes Monday through Thursday evening is either a really bad business decision or an outright misrepresentation of what's going to happen in that building going forward. It's easy to promise that we're not going to have evening and weekend classes, but that's not what's going to happen at Baker College, because that's not what happens at other campuses of Baker College. That's just so we can get their foot in the door. So it's either a really bad business plan to not have evening and weekend classes, or they're just flat out lying about it. And I would surmise to you that it's probably the latter.
So I'm going to need you to wrap up, please.
And in conclusion, I think that we have seen that this school has tried to be located in Ferndale. It didn't work out there, and it shouldn't work out here. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to the next speaker, and I'd like to just remind everybody in the audience, 2 nights ago was when they actually had the site plan approval process. Tonight we are talking about a zoning variance for parking only. If we could restrain from bashing their reputation and so forth and stick to the facts at hand, I would certainly appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Karen Purslow. I'm a resident of the city. And I have a letter I want to read. Dear Zoning Board members, unfortunately, I'm unable to attend the meeting this evening, but I wanted to speak against the Baker College project that is currently being considered for Lafayette Avenue. I lived in Royal Oak for 23 years, have children who are currently enrolled in Royal Oak schools at all different levels. I am from a family that is prominent in the Royal Oak community, political community, and most relevant to this discussion, a 33-year and currently very active member of Stagecrafters. As you know, Stagecrafters calls the Baldwin Theater home and is located directly across the street from this proposed development. I am highly disappointed in the direction that this once fine city has taken in the past several years under the current and preceding regimes. I am not a fan of the high-rise buildings that are popping up everywhere, and the once architecturally beautiful downtown Royal Oak is now looking like a concrete jungle. There's a lack of sunlight, and frankly, it feels like I'm driving through a tunnel as I head down Main Street, as all of these new tall parking structures and buildings envelope the city. I was disappointed to hear that the same thing may happen right across the street from what I consider to be my family's second home. The Baldwin Theater patrons, volunteers, staff, and visitors already fight an ever-losing battle for parking with the Royal Oak Music Theater. On a night when there's a performance at both the Baldwin Theater and the Royal Oak Music Theater, parking is at a premium. Often we have to negotiate with Parkrite to save some spaces for our patrons and production teams on show nights to avoid having to walk blocks and blocks to get to the theater. Hearing that the developer is looking to waive the required number of parking for the new proposed development is unacceptable. Where do you suppose the 92 vehicles will park when they can't find one in the ridiculously low number that Baker is proposing to provide? They will fill up the few spots that are already hard to come by for Stagecrafters and all of the other small businesses that need this parking to survive. The city needs to stop being so greedy and think about the people who reside in the city, the people who visit the city, work there, volunteer there, and everyone in between. The downtown area has gone from a nice place to take our children to a dark tunnel of tall buildings that has pushed out many of our favorite places to visit and eat. I hope the city makes the right decision, and if they do approve another tall building to block out the sunshine, that they at least take into consideration the parking shortfalls as they are now and not exacerbate the problem by making it an even bigger issue. I have a large family and always wished I could afford a house large enough to raise my children in Royal Oak, but the characteristics that I once loved about the city are now being raised and overbuilt. That, along with the lack of integrity of many of the politicians that are running our city, makes me proud to be a resident of a more family-friendly, resident-friendly, neighboring city. Sincerely, Emily Ellison Florkowski. My daughter sent me this letter last week and asked me to read it, and I thought I wrote it. She says in here exactly everything that I believe. And I hope that you'll take that in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. And who wants to go next? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mort Meisner. I run two businesses out of 322 East Lincoln. One is a talent business in the television industry, and the other is a cannabis consulting business as well. I'm appalled at the scurrilous attacks on a fine education institution like Baker. The pejorative fashion in which they are being painted, it's flat out wrong. I'm excited as a business owner because this will give me an additional pool for interns, which I use. I use some of them from OCC. I've engaged over the years with a number of graduates of Baker College who work in businesses I regularly deal with. So it's one thing to disagree perhaps with a structure, but to bash the integrity of a well-respected institution, not to mention accuse people of lying before they even have their foot in the door, quite honestly, I'm embarrassed and I'm appalled by it. I'm very much in favor of it. I think it'll be some of these young men and women, I'm sure, will spend money in the community. Others will not. And this will be an institution that's operating 4.5 or 5 days a week. With all due respect to the Stagecrafters people, I doubt very much that they're doing productions day in and day out. So I'm not sure exactly how many people they're responsible for bringing in. Higher education, you know, everyone would love to have University of Michigan or Michigan State or Central or U of D. I think we're proud in Royal Oak to have OCC, and I would be very proud as a business owner, business operator, to have Baker College. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And who's next? Yes, sir.
My name is Joseph Stout. I live at 516 Southwest Street. I'm a neighbor of the proposed development, and I am speaking on behalf of the houses on my street. I have signatures from 7 of the residents along Southwest Street from 416 through 516, and we are opposed to granting this parking variance. The additional 80 cars looking to park in the adjacent structure will be an issue based on a quick look at the available parking spots on different days and times, as I've shown you 3 different cases where the number of spaces available in the deck is less than 80, sometimes much less. I've got a low of 57 that was taken this afternoon at 1 o'clock. So our issue is from the neighborhood is that the students will want cheap and close parking, and the neighborhood residential streets provide a prime candidate for this overflow. While Southwest Street does have restricted parking signage, that does not stop those looking for a potential no-cost parking spot from taking advantage of the proximity and the extremely limited parking enforcement. Other nearby residential streets may also be impacted, and they do not all have parking restrictions. So I just walked over, took pictures of the sign. I found 3 occurrences during the day within a couple weeks that are all kind of grossly over that, you know, stating that the parking study is not correct. The next page, I'd also like to compare the proposal from Baker College Royal Oak to OCC and Baker College Auburn Hills. So while there are fewer classrooms at the Baker College Royal Oak proposal, the other 2 have twice as many. The number of parking spots is dramatically different. OCC Royal Oak has over 1,000 parking spots. They have 2 decks plus surface lots. Baker College of Auburn Hills has 1,000 spots. So OCC Royal Oak, also in the CBD, has 4 times the amount of parking as required by ordinance. So to grant a variance, you know, the document states the relief must be granted without substantial detriment to the public good. This development's impact on parking will exacerbate an already difficult parking situation in the adjacent residential neighborhood, located less than a block away, and does cause detriment to the public good. We ask that you do not approve this parking variance. So the signatures are on there, the map of where our houses are relative to the development, and then just where some of the information about the other universities, that's also on there too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And who'd like to go next? Is that Mr. Reddy in the back?
Hi, my name is Arvind Reddy. I live at 618 South Pleasant, and my business is located at 4th and Main. So I'm about 4 blocks living and working from this proposed development. And I just wanted to say I'm very much in favor of it, and I think, you know, bringing a school with students and educators will be an asset to our community and to local businesses, as one of the previous speakers mentioned. So I think there are several places to park. And also, if this is an approved, a different use, will bring more people and no parking. So I think this is the best option. Okay, that was all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And who's next? I see a hand right there. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Steve Garrett. I am the current owner and operator of the funeral home. Been here lived downtown for 40-plus years. I think this is a great use for this property. Again, living right next door to this parking structure that will take up some of these lacking parking spaces on the property. You can count on basically one hand the times that I have seen that structure full or down to minimal spaces. I don't see the parking as an issue. I know the neighbors. I lived on West Street for a number of years as well. I'm a neighbor of Mr. Stout. The traffic flow and that will come around. I think there'll be some changes on Fifth. I think it's a great idea, and hopefully it can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And who's next? Mr. Gomez.
Good evening. George Gomez, 2018 Guthrie Avenue in Royal Oak, past planning commissioner, past zoning board commissioner. The issue I have for you to consider is the 2-foot variance on some parking spaces and not on all. I think you have to be careful, in my opinion, or maybe the engineering department can explain to us to you as one of your questions, as to how can we get away with 2 feet on one and not on all of them? If the standard isn't correct and can't be followed for all, then it should be given to any. Or if you do approve the 2-foot variance, have a reason for it. Call it compact cars, call it something else. But if you set a standard which seems innocent for 2 feet only, you set a standard. And I think it has to be applied to all. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. And who's next? Yes, in the back. Ms. Harrison.
Good evening, Laura Harrison, longtime property owner in the downtown. We own 3 buildings. I started my business in downtown Royal Oak at 519 South Washington in 1983. I was in business before OCC, before Baskin and Robbins, before Stagecrafters, before Prontos, and before the Fifth, which was still a furniture store when I was in business. So I think I know downtown a little bit. I was down here for 28 years as a business owner, and then I moved up on Catalpa. 2 years ago, I was able to sell my business and retire. I know there is a city parking structure next door, or you say across the street, across Fifth, on the other side of Fifth. It's next to the Baker proposed building. This structure is the go-to parking for businesses on South Washington between 4th and 7th. The Royal Oak Music Theater, the 2 restaurants on the corner of 4th and Lafayette, one has recently closed, and most of all, day and night, stagecrafters. Even the bars on 5th still park in that parking. My husband has parked in that lot several times because he likes it. And he usually can park, but the last few times, he had to park somewhere else because the lot was full. There are also apartments around in that area, and those tenants park in there because their apartments have no parking lots. It's a very closed area around there. Parking studies and being married to an engineer for 51 years, I've seen more parking studies than I ever want to see again. They are as common and useless as a broken umbrella on a rainy day. I just, you know, what you have to do to study something is to pull up a chair for 3 days in a row and see who comes and goes and how much. I think that the proposition they make, the building is fine. You've got to solve the parking problem. And granting a variance is not going to help. I used to sit there, guys. You were lucky you could get out of me a variance for 1 car. A lot of you know it. And so I think that really, I think it's too big a variance. I'm going to stick with the parking. I think it's too much. You've got to figure out how to do it. Because young people, and my granddaughter goes to Baker. She's almost finished. We have paid tuition for 5 years. My husband said, I'm going to pay her tuition to go to school, and she enjoys it.
Ms. Harris, I need you to wrap up, please.
Yeah, I know. And so what I've got to say, you've got to solve the parking problem, because remember, there are more people downtown than just students. And students are lazy. I hate to tell you that.
Right. Who's next? Yep. Yes. Please, yes.
My name is Betsy Schrock, and I'm here representing Stagecrafters. I don't live in Royal Oak, but I spend all of my waking hours in Royal Oak at Stagecrafters. I've been doing that for 23 years. The parking has gotten progressively worse. No, we don't have evening performances 7 days a week, but we do have a number of people in the building from 10 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, most days of the week. If we're not putting on a show, performing a show, we are building for a show or costuming or whatever. But we have a number of people that are in that building every day of the week. And those people make use of all the city opportunities like the restaurants and that sort of thing. So we do bring a lot to the city, just our people. But then you add the patrons on, and they get a good feeling about Royal Oak because they have dinner before they come to the show or after the show or whatever. We have to pay, we are all volunteers. We have to pay $3 a day, $3 a night to park in order to do volunteer work. And when we can't find a parking spot in the structure across the street and have to walk several blocks to find a spot and then come in and do our volunteer work, it doesn't sit well with us. So I think that rather than make the parking situation worse by granting this variance, there should be another consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Who's next? Yes, sir. Oh, I'll get you next, sir.
Good evening. My name is James Okori. I am the owner of the 505 Lafayette building right across the street on the southeast corner of 5th and Lafayette. While every one of the individuals here today have an excellent argument on both sides of the fence, I think what we lack to think and what we lack to truly dive into is the alternative. I heard earlier that Mr. Garrett's business is closed. Is that correct?
That is incorrect.
It is incorrect.
Sir?
Okay.
Sir, throw your comments this way, please.
I'm asking whether or not his business was closed. That's why, because earlier I believe it was mentioned that it was closed. But in the event it isn't, either way, I think the future of the corridor could see different uses that wouldn't require variances. And in that case, there wouldn't be an institution sitting here willing to spend substantial amount of money, more than any other office building will. Trust me, I know this. And they're diving and they're spending a surplus of money to accommodate the parking in their structure. And I would rather have a partner, have a neighbor, have an institution in here like Baker College, knowing what we have and knowing that they're putting extra, a substantial amount of funds that they're investing to help suppress any parking issues, then what will, I promise you, happen in the future when Mr. Garrett decides to sell, which I hope will happen, and perhaps whether it's today or another time in the future, the alternative will be a terrible blow to the parking. So my support of the project is for what I know, what we have today, versus what any builder or developer will come in and they'll meet every situation, every requirement from the zoning board, every parking requirement, everything, which is to say they won't have to put any parking structures up. And the impact there will have a lot more people in the room than we do today. So my support for the project lies with what they're willing to invest, and that's my statement, and that's my support.
Thank you, sir. And who's next? Yes, sir.
I am Dr. Andrew Clements. I'm one of the members of the Board of Directors of Stagecrafters. Just have a couple of quick things for you guys to consider. We do, from my experience, have a problem with parking at peak levels. Whenever there's an event going on at the Royal Oak Music Theater, I show up an hour and a half to 2 hours early for one of our performances, and I'm usually getting one of the last spots in the deck. So there's definitely not sufficient peak parking. There's also a pedestrian safety issue crossing Lafayette at 5th. I myself was nearly struck by a car crossing the street there. I know that our office staff has had several close calls. So when we add additional parking demand and we don't provide sufficient parking to offset that, I think that exacerbates a potential pedestrian safety issue. So that's just something for you folks to consider.
Thank you, sir. And who's next? Yeah, way in the back.
Good evening. My name is Michael Keith. I'm with the Office Coffee Shop located at 4th and Lafayette. Excuse me. You know, I park in the lot all the time, pretty much daily. I pop in and out throughout the day, and I rarely have any issues. I don't have any issues finding a spot. Today, I did notice, you know, well over 100 spots at like 11:30, you know, and there was another 60 or 70 later on in the day. So I popped in and out twice, no problem. And where I find that, you know, looking or listening to Tuesday also, talking about their average of 80 so number of required spots. So being that 20 being the delta to meet that parking structure, I think that's not going to put a dent on that structure. And with the amount of money that people have invested within the structures, across town, I think has been very, very productive to do that. So in terms of being parking available, I think that there is parking available. For me as a business owner, I think it's exciting to bring in additional students and that type of education and to help with the workforce also through the interns and different things of that nature. So I find that very productive for the space. And again, to the alternative point, you know, a building has architecture and design in itself, and it's long-standing, right? They're not building a building to be knocked over in 5 years. So with that, it could be turned into office of some sort or something else, and we would gain an additional 60 some odd spaces to park when somebody else would not have had to comply with those requirements. So in terms of long-term vision, that building can meet multiple things and will already have a plus to that, and it makes it valuable even for that building to be used in different ways. So that's my take and I'm for it.
Thank you, sir. All right, anybody else? Yes, sir.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Jason Dilley. I'm the chief of ophthalmic surgery at Henry Ford Hospital. It's nice to speak to you all this evening. I have advanced degrees from the University of Michigan, Columbia University, and University of California. Why am I reciting my curriculum vitae to you? The reason is because I have spent a lot of my life on college campuses. I have much respect for what Baker College is trying to do, and I welcome them with open arms. What I have to tell you is you cannot underestimate the need for parking in urban and suburban educational systems. I've sat here and listened to arguments from both sides. I've listened to the well-crafted arguments from these fine folks from Baker College. No hardship has been proven. The ordinance is sound. No variance should be given. Thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you, sir. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Deborah Nichols. I live at 1800 Briarwood Drive in Madison Heights. And within the next 2 months, I plan to be moving to South Lafayette, which will be right near West Harrison. So I have been 7 years volunteer with the Oakland Macomb Youth Football League. So I spent a lot of time in Royal Oak, other cities. I work with the youth in other communities as well in different functions. And I was here the other night when they were talking about like graduation rates of the kids from Royal Oak that perhaps move on to college, and I think it was around 50%. They did talk about how they would work with the schools to try and integrate them into a program with the school. And nobody here tonight has really talked about that, what the effect would have like on the local community, the families that reside here in the surrounding cities. And I just feel like it's a really good asset to have that because you're building your citizens of tomorrow. So you don't have something like this. If they go to OCC, that's fine. But I just feel like it would be really a good thing to have to bring the kids into college locally like this. A lot of kids are looking to go away to school. I have 2 kids that will be attending both out of state. I would prefer to have them here, you know, and my daughter is near Chicago, and I'm pretty sure she's not coming home. So when she graduates college, she's using her skills and she's contributing to another community. And I really just feel like this would be a good opportunity versus an office building, which everyone keeps mentioning might happen. So, I mean, I guess to look at that as an option. There is no talk tonight either about the contributions they would make, like to the community, how they would work on internships. I believe they said on Tuesday that they require all their graduates to do internships. I think that would help, you know, the local business, looking at that pool. I guess that's pretty much it. My support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And who's next? Mr. Razor?
Thank you. Jim Razor, 502 West Lincoln. I still own my first house at 718 Southwest. My office is at 201 East 4th. Thanks for your service to the community. I know what it's like to sit up there. And I just wanted to make an observation. This is the first public comment I heard where parking structures were talked about favorably by everybody. which I think is cool. That parking structure we put at 5th and Lafayette obviously was a good move. I'm not so much hearing that there isn't good cause for this. There appears to be problems with the property in terms of the water table that present a hardship. Plus, we have a requirement as to how high the building could be, and certainly nobody wants it to be higher than it should be, so you can't put an extra floor in it. Obviously, having the ability to have an undergraduate degree or a graduate degree in downtown Royal Oak is awesome. What I'm hearing is things that you could perhaps put in your conditions to modify any parking issues. Stagecrafters is a great institution. We certainly want them to have enough parking, but you know, maybe we can work, what I'm hearing is management problems. Maybe everybody from Baker parks at the post office. Maybe, you know, you make some sort of deal with the Catholic Church to get the extra parking. Maybe there's, you know, some lease agreement you can do to work on it. But in terms of the variance itself, which is at the core of what you're considering, my thought is that, yeah, there's a hardship in the land. It's a great site for them to do this. They've certainly worked the best, and the alternative really is an office building with no parking at all that they have to provide. There's a lot of uses. You could have a law firm in there that's 6 stories high that wouldn't need any parking at all. Here you got somebody, they're gonna provide parking, lots of internships, cool things happening, graduate degrees, culinary interns. But the core issue is they can't go down 2 levels and they can't put more parking in the building. So, you know, that's a hardship. But management-wise, you know, you have those conditions at the end. You can certainly put something in there to manage the parking load in a way that's, you know, favorable. Plus, Commissioner Anderson, or Member Anderson, I should say, you are always so wise to point out things like, well, is that parking available on the weekends? You know, I mean, I think that's a really good thing. Stagecrafters has weekend demands. They're not having weekend classes. Maybe there's some synergy there that helps everybody. That's my 2 cents. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? All right, not seeing anybody, I will go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to this side of the table. Did you have a comment, or? Oh, I thought you wanted to say something, and, you know, before I have any additional discussion on our side, why don't you come up, and if you want to address anything that you heard, please do so now, if you would.
Well, I'm not going to address everything I want to address. I
Well,
think
but
I'll.
actually, before you say anything, let me ask you a question, though, because we are short-membered. Do you want us to proceed with this, or would you like us to hold this over till next month in hopes of having a full board?
We're going to go forward.
All right, the floor is yours, sir.
The timing is of particular interest to us related to when classes will eventually start here in Royal Oak. And we want to make activity happen this year in the construction of the building. That's why we want to go forward, and hopefully I haven't made a mistake. At any rate, I will not respond to the pejorative comments that were made. I think they were highly inappropriate, and other than that, I'm not going to say a word about it. It is surprising to me that an activity that has not provided parking speaks against this use vehemently in order to maintain what it thinks is its own interest in a parking deck that it does not own. And the result of which, their argument, will be an activity on this site which is more intense, one would imagine, and which will provide no on-site parking. Because no on-site parking is necessary for the central business district unless it falls into these very few categories of which this institution is one. So if you were to build, and it's been mentioned, which is what they're arguing for, a 7-story office building with not one on-site parking space, they will have more of a parking requirement and no on-site parking. This is a benefit to them. They've argued against themselves. It is not this institution which created the fact that central business district activities do not need on-site parking. That's the ordinance, the legislation in the city of Royal Oak. And that is what permeated most of the comments that were made. There is no doubt that we cannot do more, and that the water table, which we have established by independent studies, does not allow us to do more. It is correct that this costs a fortune for us in order to put on-site parking, which an office building will not be required to do. This is an opportunity for a win-win situation. This is not a situation for a misguided, NIMBY approach to this particular use, which is accretive and beneficial to the people who spoke against it and to the city of Royal Oak. So if you don't have any other questions to me, then I'll sit down and allow you to go forward.
Sir.
Thank you.
So let's bring it back to this side of the table. If anybody has any comments that they'd like to make at this point?
Oh, right now I'll make a move to accept one of the variances because I think one will be easier than the other. I move to accept the 2-foot minimum required length of the 20 feet for 10 parking spaces.
I support that.
Any follow-up on that motion, or?
One of the most popular vehicles out there right now is a Ford F-150. Its average length is 209 inches, so you're just under 18 feet right there. The majority of vehicles out there meet 18 feet, so even if you have the compact use there, I've been in spots where SUVs have gone in the compact use. So I don't have any concern at all with this one for 10 spots, and it's labeled out as just 10 spots. So I don't have any problem with it.
Any follow-up?
I was kind of thinking compact, but I agree with you. Sometimes those big cars get awfully compact in those spaces, so I agree. It's, I can live without it as well.
All right, not seeing any other, oh, yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
I would feel more comfortable having them labeled as compact or sedan, because when you start, people don't always pull straight up to the very end. Sometimes the rear end's hanging out, makes it a little difficult to get around, or even maybe see a car that's coming around the corner, but that's my 2 cents.
I will make that a friendly amendment.
Sure, I'll accept that friendly amendment. Such spots have to be labeled as compact.
Are you okay with that, labeling this? Okay, so. All right, so not seeing any other comments? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, that motion passes. So that gets us to the juicy part.
I just
Yes,
want to make
ma'am.
a note that given the variance you just approved for those spaces, the parking waiver would be for 82 spaces
correct.
and not the 92 listed.
I will.
Go ahead, Ms. Kroll.
Yes, then I will make a motion to approve the 82 spaces.
We have a motion by Mr. Kroll.
I'll second.
Mr. Kroll?
I can't feel, well, and I understand how the rules work, yet I really can't feel as though we're being fair to Baker College here. If Baker College doesn't take this space, it's going to be an office building. There's no question about it. There's not really that many other uses that could go in there. I know Mr. Garrett is planning on selling the property, and it's a matter of time. So we can sit here and complain about 67 spaces, but we're about to get 0. I find that unfair to Baker College, and I agree with a lot of what's been stated here tonight, that in fact, an education facility does help you curb the ups and downs of the economy, because healthcare and education are always constant. That's a plus. I think there is some need to build up that side of the city a little bit. I just think that it can take it. I think we're looking at that office building irregardless of what we call it. The question is, are we getting 67 spaces or not? I think having interns and having an education facility, we now have a 2-year college offering associate degrees. We have a 4-year college that's offering everything else. And you don't have to leave downtown Royal Oak to get an education. So I think, I just think that's the best use for this particular spot. And I was kind of taken back as well that people that don't supply any parking are complaining of other people's parking. So I think there's parking, in this scenario, I think the parking will be fair to that part of the city. I think if it goes office building, it's going to be a major mess. So therein lies my reasoning.
Mr. Klatt?
Well, first of all, I'd like to commend your team on your presentation and report. It was very thorough. It helped us understand the parking situation and also your take on the practical difficulty. And I do think there is practical difficulty here based on what you mentioned. The water table is an issue, and that's pretty constant or continued throughout the downtown area. We've experienced that in several projects that we've designed as well. So I think that is an issue. You can't go lower. You can't pick up that parking. Then I also believe that there is, as shown, there is a surplus in these parking decks, and you can definitely accommodate the 20 spaces per what your report shows. So I'm in support.
Any other comments? Ms. Zukin?
Okay, I'm really conflicted on this one. We're not the planning commission, so this has been approved. It doesn't matter to me if it's a college or an office building. It matters, though, according to the zoning ordinance. I don't see how any of the non-use variance requirements have been met. I think the problem is created by the fact that you want to put this big building in there and there's not enough parking. The water table, if your building wasn't that big, you wouldn't have to put underground parking in. On the other hand, there is the parking deck right across the street. We have to acknowledge that. And we have to acknowledge that an office building would not require any additional parking. So that's the only hardship I see that this variance puts on this particular use that's been approved and is a valid use. The hardship is that they need parking and nobody else would in putting in a bigger building. So I still would like to hear other comments before I make my mind up.
Ms. Anderson?
I'm not convinced that everybody's looking into the future accurately and saying, oh, it's going to be an office building and there's going to, and they're not going to require any parking and they can just build it as big as they want. Because logistically, I don't think an office would go in there without knowing that they're going to need parking. And if they did have a lot of people in the office, they probably wouldn't be working there very long if they couldn't find a place to park, if they were going to need the same type of parking is what I'm getting at here. So I love the idea of Baker College. I don't love the idea of this big variance. And I'm looking at all the other buildings around there. That parking structure wasn't built for just one thing. And as we increase our capacity for more buildings and more people in the buildings, they're going to need places to park too. Could be just friends coming in. And I mean, I know I park in that parking lot a lot. And I park in it from the Methodist Church. And it does get filled up. And I was pretty impressed to see that those 3 photographs of how many empty spaces there were, that's not a lot. And tonight, I couldn't find a single space. And I don't know, I think I'm on some white stripes, but hopefully the snow is covering it, just saying. But, so I'm very torn on this one, too.
Mr. Olpak?
I'm torn also. I think it's a great opportunity, especially compared to what could be there. However, also I'm concerned with them saying there's 17 classrooms, and if there's 67 students, and you figure the teachers in, that only is about 5 classrooms in use, which means why would you do 12 more classrooms on one time? And if you're going up to 120, well, that's maybe about 10 classrooms. So you still got 7 classrooms that you don't have in use right now that might in the future get used. So I understand the hardship of them having to provide the parking when another use doesn't have to. But I have a feeling there's going to be a lot more parking in the future if all of a sudden they happen to even do 15 classes or 14 classes at any given time. But I know that's still better than an office building going there that doesn't require it. So I'm really, really torn because I think no matter what, whatever goes there is going to be messing with the parking in the first place. So then this is a lesser of the evils, but it's a known evil right now. How do we know that if we turn this down that an office building goes there. Could be nothing that goes there. Could be just a small, one-story retail. I mean, I don't know.
Any other comments? Mr. Kroll?
I would say if you look at the trends in Royal Oak right now, and a one-story retail's not gonna go there realistically. I mean, it's one of the few spots we have for an office building in downtown. I couldn't support this at all if it weren't in the CBD. I can't look at this group and see them any different than an office building, and they're bringing 67 spots. So we can go on the IFCOM, but I think we all know what's gonna land up there. And I think Mr. Garrett has the right to sell his building, and probably to the person that's gonna give him the most amount of money. And as long as they stay within the footprint of that space, they can go there without parking. So I don't think you have to crystal ball it all that much to really see what's gonna happen there.
Ms. Anderson, then Mr. Klatt again. Did I see your hand also, Mr. Gavin?
I do have a comment, yeah.
And my other comment that I'd forgotten to mention was that they were all saying about Ubers and things like that, and lifts and the bicycles. Well, no one's going to be doing much bicycling in the winter, and I do believe that Michiganders, we're still keen on our cars. And, you know, the rite of passage is when you're 16 years old, you usually get a car somehow, some way. And so eventually in the future, maybe years down the road, we will be a less dependent on cars, but right now, it's going to be an issue regardless. And I don't think that the kids are going to team up together, because this isn't the kind of colleges it is. If it was a high school college, if it was or a high, you know, that kind of a continuing education, they might know each other, they might do that, but they're going to be coming from all different areas, and so I don't agree with the fact that they'll be doing a lot of carpooling in this case.
Mr. Klatt, then Mr. Gavin.
Oh, go ahead. I guess a lot of this seems to be just trying to figure out like how many people will actually be there, you know. And to Mr. Offak's point on the classrooms, I guess I work with a lot of educational institutions, so it's generally, you know, elementary through high school, and you can see in building usage that there's often a lot of unused classrooms during times of the day, because, you know, there's the normal teaching stations that you think of as classrooms, but then as they were pointing out, that they have some specialized labs. It sounds like there's some culinary use that's going to be going on, and those classrooms won't always be in use all the time. So that's going to take away from that 17 and bring it down. I don't know how much exactly, but I can understand how there's going to be a lot of empty space at various times throughout the day. So that's why I think the number of classrooms bothers me less, and I'm not quite as worried about those spaces, you know, being used for maybe other purposes at the time. It's just from the background that I have in that area. So that was the comment I was going to throw in.
Ms. Robinson?
I like the idea of having the college right here in downtown. I am concerned about the parking. I'm concerned about the number of people per the classroom. That really kind of bothers me, what we're being told, how many people are actually going to be there. But when we compare that to with if there was an office building there, then we don't have that restriction there. And who knows how many parking spaces we are losing, or I guess space of that. So I'm conflicted on this one. I am. I think it's a nice looking building. I think it'll be a plus to the our downtown. I like that, so just kind of weighing the pluses and the negatives.
I will be supporting this motion, and I will freely tell your team, just looking at the raw data before your presentations both Tuesday and this evening, I was a pretty firm no, but hats off to your team for really making a compelling argument about how the numbers are going to work and how it's going to synergize with our downtown. I really have always believed in shared parking analysis. You're going to be using the facilities and the parking facilities at times when other facilities, such as the Stagecrafters and Royal Oak Music Theater, will not be using them. I think it's a little short-sighted to only look at the Lafayette structure, quite frankly, depending on how people are coming and going and what they're doing. And if they're going to go out to Bar Louie after class and have a drink with one of their buddies, they may park in the Center Street lot or whatever lot. I think the three structures combined in the immediate vicinity can more than absorb these 82 spots. And then it takes you to the other argument that, you know, if in fact this were rejected and a full-scale office building came in with zero parking requirement, I just look at all the various scenarios, and I just see this as a win-win across the board. Plus, you know, needless to say, getting a college in town, I think is a pretty cool thing. So I'll be easily supporting this. Mr. Klatt.
Just a quick observation. I believe the report shows that between all the decks, there's a surplus of 755 parking spaces. So with that alone, I mean, you can support the full class load within the decks, even without your parking, based on the report. So just a quick observation.
Mr. Kroll.
One of the things that no one's talked about here tonight is it seems like everywhere you look, there's going to be a lack of cars more than, with all the automated cars and different things that are coming at us. They're talking about having a whole lot of parking lots that we're not going to need down the road, so I don't know how that plays, but we're going to need less parking, not more.
Is anybody else?
I'm just
Ms. Zukin?
I'm gonna throw in, I think we're gonna, like Ms. Anderson said, we're gonna have cars there. There's gonna be a lot of cars. But then when you think of this as being classrooms, these are gonna be younger people who can walk farther. I know I wouldn't wanna walk too far, but they can do it, so. Will they?
All right, so have we gotten to the point? All right, I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve the variance for 82 spots signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
No.
Can I have a hand of the nays, please? Oh, all right, thank you very much. All right, motion passes. Thank you very much.
Build it, guys.
So how long do you guys think you actually stick a shovel in the ground?
This year.
Well, good luck with it. We look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Did a very nice job tonight.
All right, I'll give the room a minute to clear out here.
Sir, don't forget your, okay, yeah.
Yep, we got it, we got it.
Thank you all. It's a very telling graphic right there. It's.
Can I ask you folks to take any conversations that you have out in the hallway? We still do have a meeting going on.
They're studying the peak hours. So there's a 755 space surplus across.
Oh, yeah. No. Maybe one is full because it's super heavy. And well, I'm already out of it, but like.
That's the highest and best. It's gonna be nuts.
And with the use, I mean,
Folks, can I ask you to please take your conversations out in the hallway, please?
actually gonna be like the parking space. You just they're never there. You look at high schools are more intense use of that. There's a ton of open space.
Thank you again for your time. We're integrated parking, we're making the change.
So you're the other two, huh?
You get to follow that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
We're gonna try and do a little quicker.
It's still parking, but we'll get to that point.
Folks? Thank you. All right, moving right along. Our second case, which is case number 200202, public hearing on the appeal of Keith Gilbert, petitioner and owner for the following four variances: alter and expand a non-conforming structure. B, waive 18 feet of the minimum required 25-foot front yard setback along Lloyd Avenue for an accessory structure. C, waive 3 feet of the maximum allowable ground floor area of 800 square feet for an accessory structure. And D, waive 7 feet of the maximum allowable driveway width of 25 feet to permit construction of an addition to an existing non-conforming garage accessory structure located at 1902 Northwood Boulevard. Ms. Sherhart.
Okay, so this parcel is irregularly shaped, and it's a corner lot with frontage along Northwood, Maplewood, and Lloyd Avenue. The site is currently improved with a 2-story single-family home and a detached accessory structure of 603 square feet. The property is zoned one-family residential. The existing garage has a 17.3-foot setback from the Maplewood right-of-way, and a 17-foot setback from the Lloyd right-of-way. The property received a variance in 1961 to allow the construction of the garage at its current location. And then moving to what is proposed. So the petitioner proposes to expand the garage by adding a 20-foot deep by 10-foot wide addition along the north face of the garage. The petitioner also proposes to reconstruct their driveway at a width of 32 feet. Taking the variance requests one by one, first, the existing garage is presently non-conforming due to its setback along Lloyd Avenue. If I go to this diagram here, shows the way that neighboring properties are oriented. Our ordinance requires an accessory structure to maintain a 25-foot setback if the parcel, shares a side property line with the neighboring parcel. And so in this case, the accessory structure would need to maintain a 25-foot setback along Lloyd Avenue. The current garage maintains a 17-foot setback, so it's currently non-conforming, and their request is to expand a non-conforming structure in a non-conforming manner. This requires a variance. Specifically, by expanding the garage to the north by 10 feet, the proposed setback will be 7 feet from the Lloyd property line. As 25 feet is required, the petitioner seeks a variance to waive 18 feet of the minimum required setback. Next, the proposed garage exceeds the 800 square foot maximum for an accessory structure by 3 square feet. So the petitioner seeks a variance to waive those 3 feet. The expansion does meet the lot percentage requirement. With the addition, the accessory structure would be 9.2% of the total lot area, and 10% is the maximum, so they're within that point. Lastly, the petitioner proposes to reconstruct their driveway at 32 feet in width. The zoning ordinance dictates that a driveway can be no more than 25 feet in width at the property line. Thus, the petitioner seeks to waive 7 feet of the maximum driveway width of 25 feet. And I did want to point out that the current property does have a driveway at a non-conforming width of 32 feet, but as they are reconstructing it, they're actually, I think, shifting the driveway to the other side and expanding it to 32 feet, but going farther north on the property. So do you have any questions for me?
Mr. Oak.
Do you know what the, sorry, excuse me. Do you know what the, sorry, my mind is not good because of my cold. The setback of the house that's at the corner of Ferncliff and Lloyd.
Ferncliff and Lloyd?
Yeah.
So
It's at the opposite end of that triangle.
So this property here?
Yeah, the 1919 Lloyd, yeah.
I don't know the exact, but I think it is somewhere close to 25 feet. It maintains a front yard setback is the important thing, and
Okay.
that's what matters.
I just wanted to check that. Okay.
Just kind of piggybacking on that, so the front yard setback is that, do the two backyards that are between those two properties, does that negate anything, or is that still, I guess, because it seems like, well, okay, the front yard setback is for that little corner, it ends there because the other two properties are now the backyards of someone. You see what I'm saying? Is there any kind of a?
I wish I had the, actually, let me go to a different image that can show that they actually do share a property line.
Oh, you mean that tiny little sliver of fence that I saw when I drove past?
Yeah.
It was strangely weird.
So this sliver here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that little,
Oops.
like, I did notice that. I wasn't sure if somebody at one time just kept adding the black fence. Because then there's, I don't know, it's like a little tiny skinny pie wedge. So, but,
I mean, that, this is the shape of the parcel. It does neighbor a property on Lloyd.
okay. I understand.
All right, any other questions? All right, not seeing any. Folks?
Okay. May I give some handouts?
Oh, absolutely.
Great, so, thank you, that just shows that, sorry.
Keith
Gilbert.
Introduce yourself for the record if you would, please.
Keith Gilbert,
Lisa Gilbert.
1902 Northwood. Yep, that's
Floor
our
is yours.
house.
And this is a map showing our neighbors that we've given information about this expansion to, and showing their support. We didn't get any negative feedback from our neighbors. So even the person that has the ranch on, I don't know if it's technically Lloyd or
It's,
Ferncliff, Lloyd,
919
who's
Lloyd.
kind of a difficult neighbor, approved it. So we wanted to pass that out.
And what we shared with them is the report that all of you have, so everyone has the same info. And I guess what we want to do, and then, or we'll begin with what we want to do, which is to add one more bay to get one more bay for parking. We do have 3 cars. We each own a car, and then I have a company car with work. And so that one sits out, and it would be nice and winter to get that inside.
Additionally, we really can't park on the street in our
Yes, that's what I
neighborhood
was-
unless we go behind our house, which we can't see the car if we park it behind our house, because in front of our house, we have a fire hydrant. And then there's a little triangular little park area across the street from us that also has a post office box. And people come all the time and stop and park there to drop stuff off in their post office box. So we can't really park next to our house on the Maplewood side because we would be hindering traffic completely if somebody comes by to put mail into the post office box. So we're just trying to get, cars off the street, which we really can't do anyway, and keep them inside. My husband gets a car through work, but it's not one he picks. So he could be assigned a full-size truck that isn't going to fit in a parking spot on our driveway because our driveway is shallow. So it would overhang into the sidewalk. So he would have to park it behind the house, which we wouldn't be able to see at that point.
And there's a storm drain behind the house where I would have to park, so it is a low spot in the street right there. And otherwise, I guess the other things I wanted to say, so that's the parking situation. I think the only other hardship would be with the shape of our lot. The front yard setback does apply on several sides, and that makes things difficult. In this view, we do show what it would look like. We want it to mimic the design of our house and has the cross gable roof like what our house does. Right now, it just has one peak, and it just doesn't fit in well. And so this would make it look more like the house, and I think would look better.
And we want to use brick on the garage instead of just doing siding to make it look nicer. And that is why we need the extra 3 feet over the 800.
Right, since the bay we want to add is a 10 by on a knee, which is a standard one car. The way the city measures it is from outside wall to outside wall. And having the brick facade does add thickness to those walls. Technically, if we didn't have brick, it would be less square footage, but we do want it to match. And in fact, I did find a vendor that does sell this exact brick, so we can still get the same brick that this garage has, so it'll blend in perfectly. I think that covers it from us. Yeah.
Any questions? Mr. Opak?
I don't have any problem with the 3 feet over, and I don't even, technically, I can live with the 7 feet because you already got the 32 as it is. I have a little problem with it going towards Lloyd. Why didn't you go and flip it on the other side of the garage where you actually sort of have a spot already, it looks like, width-wise for a car?
I believe that'll be
So-
too close to our house.
Well, and we plan to build a back porch on the house, and those two can't coexist in the same spot.
It could, you just wouldn't have the porch as long as you're showing it, you'd have it as long as you have it. I'm just saying, if we're always trying to see what the hardship is, and for me, that's the one that doesn't have a hardship right now as to why it can't be done right there.
So it would butt it right against the house, and then you wouldn't have a walkway off from the driveway to the back door of the house. So when we had guests, there'd be no way for them to walk into the back of the house.
Ms. Sherhart, if this was an interior lot as opposed to a corner lot where they're actually started getting zapped with a double front yard standard, if you will, the side yard setback, I believe, would be 5 feet?
That is not correct. Well, it depends on the height, so
Right,
it's
right.
3 feet.
3 feet, okay.
Yeah, so the garage that's proposed is 11.5 feet in height, so it would be 3 feet from a side or rear property line.
Right. Sort of, piggyback on Mr. Ofak's comment, very often people who own a corner lot sort of get zapped just because of this front yard setback standard being applied in effect twice.
Right. Yep.
There's 3 sides.
But I'm just still confused, because you got the door in the center of the back of the house, how would putting it, because from the plan that you have, it looks like if you purely took that 10 foot and put it on the other side, even with that porch, it's just a little bit, that new porch, it's a little bit off, but if you didn't have the porch on, you'd still have plenty of room to, so I'm just confused as to how you were saying you wouldn't have any room to get to that back door.
So if you're going from here to here, that was going to be, if I remember right, 12 feet. And from this corner to the front is not a 20-foot deep bay.
Right. I understand it, but my thing is this, that's with us trying to allow you to have that full porch. What I'm saying is, I don't see the hardship presented here, because you're wanting to bring that porch that doesn't necessarily need to be that full length. So then you would have the space between the garage and the house. That's I'm wanting to see your hardship as to why you have to have that porch full, that you can't use it as it is now, which you don't have a full porch back there. I'm just trying to see that hardship.
Well,
Okay.
the porch is designed so that we can actually put a table on it.
Yes.
So that's, we don't really want to eliminate the porch.
Okay.
Mr. Clyde, did I see your hand?
Yes, well, I commend you for reaching out to your neighbors. Thank you. That's a good thing you did. So it looks like you have good support in your neighborhood. Mr. Ofak, I had the same thought too, like why can't you go to the left, maybe connect it with a breezeway, tying the house to the garage, which would have been a nice feature. I also thought about maybe extending into the rear yard, more of a tandem effect where you could have cars stacked. But the problem with that is you'd have a 40-foot-long garage along Lloyd, which probably wouldn't have been.
We can't do anything to the garage, basically.
Well, I know, that would need a variance, but you might
already-
minimize the extension over to Lloyd. But then again, that's a 40-foot-long wall along Lloyd, which wouldn't be attractive either.
Exactly.
It's hard to understand exactly how, because you don't have a floor plan here laid out to really see how the plan interacts with the garage addition, like Mr. Ofac mentioned, but I guess the one thing to consider too is there's a pretty deep right-of-way here along Lloyd, which does provide some extra setback along that, so it's not right up on that street line. So just.
Exactly.
And it's a 29-foot setback, so I mean, it is very, very big.
Yes, sir.
I think along with the shape of the lot and how, like, when I was there, I was shocked at how far away the neighbor's house was off of Lloyd. Like, you couldn't, it's not even like it's a standard, like, I'm on a corner lot, and like, if I were to be building my garage, building a garage, my neighbor's right there, but it's a ways down. I know there's trees and stuff in the way too, so you can't really see it so much. And I guess that I think plays into how I feel about this too, is just the length of how far away that neighbor is.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going by that, I kind of had the same thing, like, why are you not going in this direction on the house? That'd be to the south. But then that, to me, looked like it would just look odd to have it that close to the house. The balance was wrong to me. And going this way, going to the north, because you have that big sidewalk, median area or whatever, I mean, and I parked, so I would say, well, if it was out this far, would I be able to see? I was concerned about whether there'd be a visual issue there too, and that was like, no, you're gonna be fine because there was so much space there. I think this is gonna be an addition to the neighborhood. It's gonna look right for that neighborhood.
Ms. Anderson?
I'm having difficulty with the approach and the 32 feet, because now's the opportunity for us to get that into compliance, and I don't see why you couldn't just use the 25 feet and then angle it over to that side, that's the side garage, or the one that looks like it looks like it's gonna be for lawnmowers and things, because you've got garage doors on both sides, right? Correct?
That is a thought for long
term.
Mowers, or if we ever need to get machinery back there for repairs, so.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I didn't know about the driveway being out of compliance when I submitted these plans, and so, but we're not asking for more, and it's been that way since 1961, so we're just trying to ask to maintain.
Right, and I understand that, but I'm looking at what the addition you're asking us for and thinking maybe there's a little give and take here that we can now get something into compliance that wasn't into compliance before, because we're kind of giving you a little, if we do, give you something off to the side. That's my thought. So had you thought of, consider just shaving off a little side? I mean, I think you can still, don't get me wrong, angle that concrete, right? It just can't be.
Yeah, the width is measured at the property line.
Yeah.
Right.
So
It's, something we could do, I'm
that
sure, but
could be an option.
I don't know how many people are familiar with our neighborhood. It's very trafficked by people walking. So to have to come out of the garage and like back out in a funky way is going to make it a little more difficult to pull out and pay attention to pedestrians.
Yeah, you have to pay attention to them anyway, so.
You do,
regardless.
but it's easier to come out and be able to just
Well,
pull
and
back
understand we're
straight
all
and
getting
look.
compact cars now, so.
That's a good point, but the thing here is it's only 17'3" from the face of the garage to the sidewalk. So that could be, if we had more length here, you could swoop that, but and if a car is 16 feet long, that'd be a challenge to really swoop that down, so I don't think we can do it here. So if we're in agreement with the 3-car, I think the driveway would have to stay at that width to make it practical. Otherwise, there could be an issue with a pedestrian and them clipping them, I think, trying to make that turn. It's just there's not enough length.
Let me move this along. I'm going to ask you folks to take a seat. I'm going to open up the public hearing. Did either one of you two folks or Mr. Gomez want to address us on this? All right, then I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to this side of the table. Mr. Ofac?
I'm going to move to grant, I'm going to split this up just because of my own sake. I'm going to move to grant A, C, and D.
Oh, man, I forgot, and folks, I completely forgot to ask you, as we are short a board member, do you want us to proceed with this action? Okay, we'll do. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. All right. So, Mr. Ofek, you said A, C, and D?
Correct.
I'll support that.
I don't have any problem with them expanding the non-conforming structure because basically they're gonna have to do that anyway if they wanna expand the garage. I don't have a problem with it being 3 feet over. That's a minor amount compared to what some people come to us for. And I don't have a problem with them keeping the width of the driveway as it is. If they were asking for more, I would, but I think for trying to have a driveway with that short of a distance between the garage door and the road, they're gonna need that to get it. So I have no problem with any of those that are requested.
Any other follow-ups on that? The only thing I would say is, and I'll certainly support this, but I mean, I would be frankly in support of all 4 variances. And again, only because, you know, they're being held to a standard that if they were the house next door, that wouldn't even be part of the discussion because the setback requirements would be different. They'd have the front yard not on, you know, both sides. So I think they're being sort of, given the scope of the land and the size of the land that they have, I think what they're proposing is very modest. But for the fact that they've got that corner lot standard, they're being held to a different standard than their neighbor would be, and I just think that's a bit inequitable. Ms. Zukin.
I don't think it's inequitable because it's a corner lot, but the fact that it's such a large space between Maplewood and Ferncliff that I
Well,
think.
that weighs into it too, sure.
Yeah, because having it closer to Lloyd than the house on Ferncliff, I don't think has much of an impact here, whereas in a smaller lot size, the more normal lot size, it would. And then I have a question for staff. Is the house, that triangle that's not built on across the street on Maplewood, is that buildable? Do you know?
I think it could be city-owned. Is that a question that you know the answer to, Joseph? It's a park, right? It's like a pocket park?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know. There's no sign, but the city does come maintain it, so I've.
That's an indication then.
The city's cutting the grass, then, yeah.
Yeah, so that makes it a lot easier for me to accept a 32-foot wide driveway here also, because nobody has to look at it.
Voting on A, C, and D.
All right, well, let's do this, and I'm gonna call for the vote on the motion to approve A, C, and D. If anybody has any other questions, all those in favor of that motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Which brings us back to B, who wants to tackle that?
Monday.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It's only because of the 32-foot drive. That's the
Understood.
only reason.
All right.
You flipped it and put the D in there, or taking the D out, I would have been okay.
We'll make sure Ms. Sherhart's all caught up on her motion first. You good?
Okay, thank
All right. And did you want the floor?
Anthony, you want to keep you? Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve B then, as well.
Support.
Any other discussion on that motion?
Well, they can talk first and then I'll say.
Yeah,
Mr. Kroll?
I think there's certainly a practical difficulty with the lot. Anytime you're facing 3 different streets, builds many complications to what you can build. I think it's a reasonable use. I think it's not impeding the neighborhood. Obviously, they have support from their neighbors in doing it. I think this is one of the things you can overbake it a little bit if you design it too much. And I think it's I can't see really anything better that they could do, given the lot. So.
And you supported Mr. Gavin? Any
Yes.
comments?
I just think in my head, the reason for the front yard setback, the reason for that is so attenuated here because of the distance between those houses. It's a long way, and it's not like there's a neighbor right behind them seeing that garage all the time. It's a ways. So I think it serves it well here, and that's a good reason for the hardship of the lot.
And I'll throw it over to Mr. Ofak.
In my opinion, it is a hardship that they've brought upon themselves, they could easily have flipped the garage to the other side and not need this variance, as well as possibly even create a breezeway and connection into their house so that they don't even need to go outside to get into their house. Although I do agree that there's a nice big green space in front, having it stick closer to the to the road actually puts it a little bit out of tune about the rest of the character of that whole area. So although there's enough green space to allow it, I think it sort of makes it stick out a little bit more, in my opinion.
Any other comments? Mr. Klatt?
I agree with Mr. Ofak's point about flipping it. I think that could have been done. I think you could have creatively solved that, nice breezeway, modified the rear porch. But I will be in support based on the deep right-of-way you have there and just the irregular shape of the lot. So I'll support it.
All right, not seeing any other hands, I will call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
All right, you're all set. Motion passes. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. All right, so moving right along, that takes us to the 2019 annual report. Is there anything that staff wanted to point out in that at all, or?
I don't believe so, unless you have any questions that you have.
Any questions for staff on the report?
No.
And that moves us along to E2, the election of officers. Mr. Kroll?
I'd like to make a motion that we leave it as is with Clyde chairing and Anthony co-chair.
I'll support.
All right. Any other nominations from the floor? All right, not seeing any, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. So that takes us to public comment, but it looks like everybody's leaving.
George, you got anything to say?
You've always got something to say,
Yeah,
George.
George, come on.
All right, so that takes us to the mystery motion.
Motion to leave.
We have a
I'll
motion to
support.
adjourn. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.